What's up, guys? Welcome back to another Revit video. In this video we're looking at project parameters. We've done past videos where we looked at parameters and parameter types within families, but now we're looking at parameters in a project environment. So what is the difference between that and a family? Well, honestly not that much, but I'll show some examples to how those are applied in a project environment versus a family. That can be pretty significant, and their uses are a bit different. So I'm in just a basic out-of-the-box template, and I've gone to the Manage tab, and I've got project parameters. So if you go to the Manage tab and you go to project parameters right here, this is what we're going to be working with. As soon as I click that, I can see I have some extra parameters in here I don't need at this point, especially for this video. But what you will see, just if you're working with an out-of-the-box Revit 2020 template, architectural template, is you'll see occupant. That's great. We're not going to mess with anything like that. I'm going to go ahead and remove that, so we just don't have any project parameters. I'll hit OK, go back to project parameters, and you can see I've got nothing. So what are project parameters? Well, if you're anything like me, you might be a bit intimidated by them, especially if you're not familiar with them. I know I was before I knew what they were, but my hope is that in this video you find some uses and some understanding as to what they are, where you can use them, and how they might be helpful. So if at any point in this video you do learn something, do demolish that like button. It really does help me. So first, what are project parameters? They are parameters that you can add to all the different categories that are built within Revit to add some extra functionality to model elements, whatever it might be. And I'm going to go through some of those and give you some examples of where you might use them and what you would see and how you'd go about making those. So the first thing we need to do is click Add. So let's say I'm going to make something for doors, and I'll show you how that works out in just a second. But here's the whole dialog box for project parameters. You can see it says parameter properties. We're wanting to work with project parameters, which is what we're talking about here. We're not working with shared parameters. I'll save a completely separate video for that. That's completely more advanced, and honestly I would try to avoid shared parameters if you can just because they can be kind of confusing, and they involve a separate file to keep track of. So again, we're working with project parameters. This is something that you've seen before. It's just the name of the parameter, what discipline. I would keep it common, the type of parameter, which I did cover in a previous video, all these different types, and as well as some examples, and then grouping. It's just where these parameters we make are grouped under in our properties. And then you finally have to decide whether you want a type or an instance parameter. Looking over at the right, this is what's really different when it comes to project parameters. We're actually going to assign this parameter to a specific category or multiple categories in our project. And I first like to use architecture. You can check all these and you can see all the different types of categories for the different disciplines. Because I'm an architect and we're working with architecture and working in the architecture Revit template, I just want to see architecture. These are all the categories for architecture. That's great. So what do we want to do? Well, we want to make a project parameter that is centered around doors. Now again, you can apply this to different things. Maybe it's a door and stairs or whatever, but I want to show you just an example as to one. So what might we want to do with a door? Well, maybe we want to say that there's a card reader on this door. Maybe there's not. Maybe there is. We want to make another way of showing that we have a card reader on that door other than just typing in a note in a door schedule saying there's a card reader on this door. We're trying to make things a little easier in a way to where it's not just text, not just something that doesn't make sense. We want to make it to where it reads a little better, and it's a little more live. It's easier to use as well. So I'm just going to call this card reader. Again, you can name this whatever you want, but I'm going to call this card reader. And you could choose to make this a type parameter or an instance parameter. Again, I would use this as a type parameter if all of the instances of one particular type of door will have a card reader, and that's universal throughout the whole project. You could do that, but I've always done this as an instance parameter because I may have 100 different types of doors and maybe only 5 of them have card readers and they're all different types. I want that to be an instance parameter. Again, you can edit the tooltip. Never really need to do that, but you can if you want. So at this point, we're done. We can click OK. We can see we have our project parameter, card reader right there. I'm going to hit OK. And as soon as I do that, not much happens, but I'm going to click on a door, any one of these doors. And because we made this an instance parameter, we should see it in the properties of this specific door. And so as I come down, we can see that I have card reader right there. That makes sense. Well, where it's being grouped doesn't quite make sense because I have it under dimension and it's just some text. So how might we update that? Well, I'm going to go back to manage and project parameters and I'll go to modify. And unfortunately, you cannot change the type of parameter after you make it. So I'm actually going to delete this, remove this. I will add again card reader. Make sure it's an instance parameter, check door. And I want this to be actually a yes, no, because I want it to be a checkbox. You can make it text and just add an X yourself. You could do something like that, but I want this to be a definitive yes or no. And I also would like this to be not necessarily grouped under other. Maybe it's data, maybe it's construction. That doesn't really matter. You can put it wherever you want. But for the sake of this, I'll just put it under general. Hit OK. Great. And so now once I click on a door, I can see now when I come down, I can see general and there's card reader. So this is something else to be aware of. When it comes to yes and no parameters, Revit, it's just the way the coding works behind the scenes in Revit. There's not a definitive yes or no or true or false option that is a default to yes or no parameters. So if you see here, my card reader parameter showing up in the general grouping, it's checked, but it's also grayed out. So what does that mean? Well, it's kind of in an unused state, and there's not a real good way of explaining it other than it's not yes or it's not no. So that is too bad. So whenever I go to a door schedule, and this is where really the power of these project parameters show up, I'm going to go now to view schedules. I'll make a schedule that is a door schedule here, door schedule. I'll hit OK. And so what do we want to do here? Well, we want to start pulling in some of the information about all of our doors. So let's do, I've got the type of the door. That's great. Maybe I want the thickness of the door. I definitely want the width of the door, and then the height of the door. Of course, all those things that we want. You can add the sill height or whatever you want. We want the type mark because that's how we're going to organize our schedule holistically. But something else that's really nice is because we added this project parameter, card reader, we can now use it in a door schedule. It's a project parameter, it's a part of the doors. I'm making a door schedule. So now I have the option of using that. So I can pull that in. I'll go ahead and put that at the bottom. So how do we want to do this? Let's go ahead and sort this based on the type mark. We will then, yeah, that works right there. And I'll hit OK. So what do we see now? Well, we see every door in my project, and we've got all the type marks, and of course they're all random and they don't really make any sense, but that's okay. For the sake of this video, we're showing the project parameter card reader. So like I said before, you can see all the instance parameters, or the single instance parameter of all these doors being card reader showing up in my door schedule because it's a project parameter. And like I said, also, these are not in a state of true or false just because they haven't been initialized. You could say that they haven't been touched. So how would we deal with that? Well, I can go ahead and I can start clicking all these, and as soon as I click it, you can see now it's black. And once it's black, it says yes, that's a yes, a definitive yes. So another thing you can do is select them all, and you can check one of them, and unfortunately you can't select them all, but one thing I like to do instead is I'll go back to my plan here, and I will select all instances, entire project, and this will select all of the same type. You could also swipe across your whole project, filter down to doors. There you go, so you're only selecting the doors. Now you can click that. I like to turn it off by default, so I'm turning all the card readers off on all the doors. If I go back to the schedule, I can see all of these are off. So now I can simply click whichever one I need to add a card reader. Very simple. Very simple. Something I like to do a lot with door schedules, this type of thing. And again, you could add really anything that you want. Maybe it is just a text note, or maybe it's some specific text note that you need to say, oh yeah, this door is definitely, you know, it needs this specific kind of jam or whatever it is. We actually go ahead and where I work, we add in project parameters to place just simple text, but for details for the sill, jam, and height. And all it is just referring to a different sheet, a different detail on a different sheet. Something else I've seen before is adding revisions, and you could use that as a checkbox, or you could use it as a text. So let's go ahead and make revisions. Go back to manage, and I'll go to project parameters. I'm going to call this revision, because we're going to know basically this is going to take the place of us clouding the entire line in a revision. Maybe we're issuing something that requires a revision cloud, and you don't want to actually cloud every little thing in that entire line in a door schedule or something like that. You can go ahead and add a project parameter. It could be a yes or no, or it could be text, and just as at the beginning of the door schedule saying, is this revised, or is this door revised? So you can just cloud that simple thing, and it would say this entire door has been revised. So what I can do is type in revision. I'll go ahead and make this text, because we'll just add an X, so it's a little more clear. I'll group this under text. That's perfectly fine. I want to add this to doors, but maybe I also want to add this to materials. And you'll see that this one project parameter revision can be populated under the doors and materials. And that's perfect. So I'm going to hit OK. Got my type correct. Cool. Okay, so as soon as I do that, I'm going to click on this door, and I'm going to scroll down, and under text, I can see revision. That makes sense. And so maybe this door is revised. And let's go back to our door schedule so we can add this into the door schedule so it makes a little more sense. So go to my fields, scrolling down, I can see revision. Perfect. And so I want this at the beginning, so I can select all of these and move them down. So I've got the revision on top. Perfect. So now I can clearly see that I've got this revision column that is completely blank because maybe none of these are revised. I've got certain doors that have card readers on them. I can just check the box. Perfect. So maybe I've issued my first set, my first construction set. I honestly would not have this column visible until after you I honestly would not have this column visible until after you submit or issue your first construction set. So after you do that, you can start having revisions, and you will start having revisions for a particular door in this case. So all I need to do is say maybe this first door was revised for the first reissuance of a package. So all I can do is I can hit X and move on. You know, at this point, going to my door schedule, I would only cloud that single field, and that would notate and make sense as to the entire door being updated in some way or some fashion without having to cloud every little thing. That comes in really handy because you can get some giant door schedules that are very confusing to read, very long, and have a lot of information. So you probably want to cut the clouding down to your revisions down to just that single field for that door. It just makes sense. So again, what I can do, I'm actually going to do the same thing for materials. I'll go ahead and I will make a materials schedule. And of course that's under the material takeoff. And I'll just leave this at multi-category because I want to just pull in all the materials from the project. I'll go ahead and do, of course we want to pull in the material name. I'll have a mark value associated to materials that we'll sort by. Maybe I'll have some comments. I'll have a mark value. Actually, I already have that mark value for the material. And what's nice is that we see this revision project parameter showing up here. And we see that because in the options for making this project parameter, we chose the category materials as well as doors. So we can see that in all types that we choose. And in this case, we chose the doors and materials. So that's fine. I'll hit OK. We can see all our materials. These are all the materials, all the names of materials, great. So we can see all the different materials in my project. That's great. We're seeing all the instances of them. That's great too. This is definitely not what a finish schedule would look like at all in your project. I sure hope not. But when it comes to something like this, I wanted to show the fact that we can now see this revision column in my material schedule or my finish schedule. The nice part about this, again, the same as the door schedule, I can now add text, be it an X or whatever you want, to notate that that particular material was updated for that issue. That's perfect. It makes sense. I don't need to cloud the entire line because finish schedules are really long. There are lots of notes that take up the finish schedule eventually. And once that happens, you don't want to have to cloud everything. So you can simply add an X here. So the reason, why can I not add an X here? You might be wondering why not? Well, if I go look into my fields again, I can see, yeah, I've got my revision, and you remember from the door schedule, that's exactly what I needed. But because this is a material takeoff schedule, I actually have material revision there. And if you remember, I can see this material revision project parameter populating here because I chose doors and materials. So this is a material takeoff schedule. It's a multi-category, which means it's pulling in every type of category in my project, including doors. So we can see this is in a sense the other, or this, it's the same project parameter revision, but it's the door version, or not the material version, because the material version in the material takeoff schedule will have material : revision in this case. So I'm gonna have to use that one because this is a material takeoff schedule. That's how I have to use it. This one is pulling from the doors. So I'll go ahead and remove that one because we need to work with the material revision project parameter. Again, it's the same because the names are the same, and the names are the same because I applied both the door and the material category to that project parameter. So I'm gonna hit OK, and I can see that I have all these X's because I X'd this particular material. So where did I do that? If you go to materials and you type in gypsum wallboard, I'm going to look just at this particular material, go to my identity tab. These are all the built-in material parameters that you're working with in Revit. And you can clearly see I don't see revision, and I don't see it because I made that myself. That's a custom project parameter. So where would I go about editing that, or at least seeing that? At the bottom left, you can see custom parameters. And once I do that, you can clearly see now I've got my text project parameter there called revision, and it's a material parameter because we checked that in the project parameter itself. I've added an X here, and so what's happening is everywhere there's this gypsum wallboard material, I have an X as noting the revision. I can go ahead and remove this one, and they'll all remove. Again, they're all looking at the same material. That makes perfect sense. So those are a couple of examples of where you might use a project parameter. So where else might you use project parameters? Well, I'm going to go back to manage project parameters, and maybe you want to make something for a wall. Maybe you need to notate how that wall is fire rated, if it is or if it's not. I can go to add, and again, most of the time you're going to want to work with text because it's just an easy way of typing in what you want. That makes sense. And so you can be flexible with your notating, but the reason you would do that instead of putting it in the comments or some weird place within the door itself is to give it a specific category, a place to where this information goes every time. So while yes, I would probably just use text, or maybe you could even use number. You could call it fire rating, and you could make this a number. We can call this fire rating. And maybe we want to add this to doors because your fire rating is going to apply to doors as well. So maybe we can make this doors and walls. I want to make this an instance parameter, of course. I'll make this a number, and I'll probably go ahead and just put this under construction. Again, you could group this wherever you want. I'll hit OK. There we go. So I'm going to click on just any random wall, and I can clearly see there in construction, boom, there's my fire rating. So I can start to type an X, and that's not going to work because it's looking for a number. So maybe this is a 1 hour wall. Perfect. There's my 1 hour wall. That works. That makes sense. If I look at this door, highlight that door, I can see I've got my text revision. Perfect. Maybe that door is revised. I can add an X there. I can go ahead and add a card reader to that door. and under construction, I can see fire rating. Again, I'm looking for a number, so maybe this is a 2-hour door. Perfect, that makes sense. So now once I go back to my door schedule and I go to that door, I can see that that door has a card reader, and it's got an X right there saying that it's revised. And it's nice because I can even highlight that door within the model to show where it is. I can highlight it there and I can see, yep, there's my door. That's the one I worked with. And again, going back to my fields here, I can scroll down and I can see there's fire rating. Now, of course, there's a fire rating already built into the project because that's Revit. But maybe you want to add something different to it. Let's go ahead and add that in. I'll hit OK, and again, I can see there's my fire rating. That's my 2-hour fire rating right there. I'd probably rename this to hours to note that this is an hourly rating. It's based on 2 hours in this case is what it's saying. Again, you could take all of these as far as you want. Project parameters are very extensive, and I love them a lot. So a lot of times you'll see my projects, there's just tons of them because they're almost universally useful because again, you can add all kinds of parameters for any type of category in all of Revit, and it's perfect for that. Again, you can utilize all the different types that I covered in a previous video to calculate things, to hold data, to make text notes, a specific text note, all those types of things. They're very useful. So I will say again, if you did learn something, please demolish that like button. It really helps. Also, if you stuck around this long, you're the best. You're awesome. Thank you very much for sticking around this long. Also, if you would, please change the phase of that subscribe button to existing. That always helps as well. If you have any questions, leave those in the comments below. Any suggestions on future videos, leave them there as well. I sure hope you have a wonderful day, and thanks for watching.